God's way of installing a human king, that his purposes in installing a line of human kings who cannot be kings, that they're all going to fail until God is king. Again, in a way they never dreamed. He put in line, I just commend you, read 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Chronicles again. What's the point? The point is failure, 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 failure. There are no good kings, David included. They all end badly to the man. You just weep when you read this story. Isn't there one good king? Not one. David bringing down Joab with his gray hair and the last breath. You just want to weep for the man after God's own heart. Can't you stand to the end? No, because there is another one coming. There is no one to worship here in this line. There is no one to admire fully in this line. This line is about no man can be king of Israel. Watch them try. There's going to be a man, a God man. He began the way he did so that we would know only God can be king. And so we have to hope and wait for 1,000 years, and we'll see how God will be king of Israel. And now, in this 5th point, there's a God-man in the plan. The last question on Jesus' lips silences the Pharisees. Remember what it was? He quoted Psalm 110, verse 1. Which says, the Lord, Yahweh, says to my Lord, that's David calling the Messiah his Lord. The Lord, Yahweh, says to my Lord, the Messiah, the coming King, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. And then David looks to his accusers and says, after quoting them their book, if David calls him Lord, how's he his son? And that's it. There are no more conversations after that. What does that mean? If David calls the coming Messiah his Lord, how's he his son? End of conversation. No comment. On the way to the cross. The meaning is, when you think Son of David, don't just think ordinary man. That's the point. When you think Son of David, don't just think ordinary man. In the line, like the others, gonna fail. He was more than human. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld His glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father. So, only God can be the King of Israel. So God's going to come and be the King. The God-man is going to be the King, which leaves us just one last observation. In doing it the way He did it, God showed not only that only God is the rightful King of Israel, but He has to be a man. God has to be a man. Why? Because we got some sin to deal with here in chapter 12. If He weren't a man, He couldn't die. God can't die. The king has to die. Why does the king have to die? Because of a great wickedness. A great wickedness that was just passed over. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. I'm not going to kill you. I'll forgive you. You can't do that. The judge of the universe cannot sweep crimes under the rug. Judges that sweep crimes under the rug are defrocked. Right? God will not be defrocked. And the reason he won't be removed from the bench of the universe is because he has a plan. Not only must the king be God, because only God is the rightful king, he must be man, because the king must die for the sins of the people. Otherwise, these people are all going to hell for the great wickedness. And many of you know the key verse in the New Testament that just opens that so widely to us. It's Romans 3:25. Goes like this. God put Christ forward as a propitiation by his blood. In other words, God sent his Son to die, shed his blood, to remove his wrath. That's what propitiation means. A propitiation by his blood, to be received by faith. This was to show God's righteousness. Because in his divine forbearance or patience, he had passed over former sins. Like what? Like this one in chapter 12 of 1 Samuel. He just passed over it. He said, don't be afraid, all you treacherous, God-rejecting people. Don't be afraid. Trust me. I have a way to save you from hell. And 1,000 years later, according to his infinitely wise divine plan, the line of kings, which totally failed, comes to expression in Jesus Christ, who is God and man, so that he can be king and sacrifice. Otherwise, as king, he'd have nobody to rule. They'd all be in hell. The only reason we don't go to hell is because Christ died for us. Our King died for us. Did you hear it in the song? That thou, my King, should die for me. Do you remember, I have 2 more minutes. Do you remember every gospel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, tell the last court scene of Jesus being tried and have him say the same thing. And his persecutors, they say in every gospel, "Are you the King of the Jews?" And Jesus says, "You have said so." They ripped their clothing and they put him on a cross. According to plan for us and for all those rebels in 1 Thessalonians 12. In and through a great wickedness, God is putting in place a line of failing kings which would climax in a divine king and a human king, divine that he might rule, human that he might die. He rises from the dead, and today he rules. And he's coming. So that you read in the book of Hebrews, he will appear a second time, not to deal with sin, but to save those who are eagerly waiting for him. Are you? That's the only people he'll save. Those who are eagerly waiting for him. And on his robe and on his thigh